Jeff, I'm going to start with you and what you may or may not be hearing from the White House. The president obviously outlined all of this on Truth Social. Does this lift some of the political pressure that he was under?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I wrote a story yesterday, which I was preparing to talk to you guys about today, about the political risks for the president of last week, saying that he was going to pull the United States out of the war in 2 to 3 weeks, and talking about all of the victories that he perceives the United States has had during that period since it and Israel attacked Iran, only to then on Friday be undercut by, have his rhetoric undercut anyway, by the fact that the Iran had successfully had brought down a U.S. plane. And then to have one of the members of that crew not have been found on Friday or yet on Saturday. Huge political risk in addition to the military implications of that. So this is a big success story for the president. It absolutely lifts some of the political threats that come from it, but it also leads to more questions again about that timeline that he outlined last week, whether or not he ends up sticking to that or whether he ends up going through with some of the more escalatory rhetoric that was also part of his speech on Wednesday night.
And Dan, I want to ask you about the messaging around this coming from Iran. Some of our Mideast colleagues were chatting with me at the early hours for us this morning, talking about how the Iranian government is focusing not on this amazing, successful rescue, but they're focusing on the fact that they were able to down this plane in the first place. They're also talking about the fact that the U.S. lost more aircraft going in and trying to retrieve them. What is the messaging? What messaging is piercing through there? And how do you think this is going to impact the conflict in the region? Because even though this is very good news, there were still strikes overnight throughout the region, hits on energy infrastructure. Israel hit, Iran says 5 people were killed and 170 wounded in an airstrike on this petrochemical complex. So this is a moment, but the war is still continuing around it.
Well, I think the Iranians are understandably trying to draw some cold comfort out of their failure to capture this Airman, and basically looking at the debris left behind. I'm not sure there's much to be gained from doing that. Perhaps for many Iranians, it's a reminder of the failed American attempt to rescue hostages back in 1979, an attempt that really sullied the record of then President Carter.
Yeah.
Back then, aircraft were abandoned, destroyed in the desert, but crew members were also killed. This is a very different situation. To our knowledge, no American personnel have been killed. Everyone's been safely withdrawn. So the Iranians are doing what they can. And frankly, I would wonder whether it's wise of them to point out to their own audience that apparently the American Rescue Party managed to set up in very short order a working base of operation, including a landing strip on Iranian soil, not less given suggestions by the Trump administration, sometimes by Israel, that there may be an attempt mounted by force to withdraw what remains of highly enriched uranium from Iran. By every account, that would require a major excavation campaign, some very heavy lifting of those canisters, 440 kilograms worth of canisters, potentially the erection or the creation of a landing strip, an air zone. So if anything, the Iranians are telling their own people that the Americans have capabilities that potentially, and I say potentially, could be reapplied in a major strategic operation to deny Iran that enriched uranium sometime in the future.
Jeff Mason, we want to talk about a different post that the president wrote yesterday before he got to the pilot. This is before we knew the pilot had been rescued. Remember when I gave Iran 10 days to make a deal, he wrote, or open up the Hormuz Strait. Time is running out, 48 hours before all hell will rain down on them, R-E-I-G-N, rain down on them. Glory be to God. A statement that has generated the headline on the Drudge Report, Trump invokes holy war. Is this ultimatum still in place?
Well, I would say it's probably still in place until he tells us it's not. That said, my suspicion is, based on having covered President Trump for so long, that one of the things that generated that social media post yesterday was his frustration or sense of being under pressure because of this airman who had not yet been captured. So we'll see if that changes the dynamic for the president. He will no doubt be feeling a rush of success from this operation now, and that may impact impact the next steps. But that doesn't mean that the impact will mean the president won't follow through on that threat. It again just generates a question of will he still be in the mood that he seemed to be at the beginning of last week of just wanting to get out in 2 to 3 weeks, or will he feel flushed by this military operation and success that, by the way, started out with a military failure of having a plane shot down, which contradicts the air superiority argument that he had been making, or will it? I guess that's just the question, Joe. Is what happens next in terms of whether the president wants to continue that escalation or not. But that's a long answer to your short question, and I'll circle back, which is, as far as I think we can tell, that threat is still there until he removes it.
Mm-hmm.
And Dan, I want to go back to what you were talking about that airstrip, because AFP is reporting the U.S. used an unused or an outdated airstrip near Isfahan. There is a nuclear facility there. They don't seem to be, it's a large area, they don't seem to be in the same place. But you have information, I understand, on Israel's assistance to the rescue operation. Can you tell us what you've learned and how they were involved?
Well, as we were preparing for this interview, one media outlet reported that 2 Israeli commando units were involved in those recovery efforts. That hasn't been confirmed by Israeli officials. What Israel has says, and I think this is predictable and frankly acceptable and credible, that they helped from the outset in terms of shifting resources, both in terms of offensive strikes aimed at suppressing potential threats, encroaching Iranian groups, Iranian capture parties, posses, and the like, trying to reach that airman, as well as intelligence. The Israelis, while of course the U.S. has a superpower's intelligence facilities, the Israelis are very good at tactical intelligence. That's why they've headed up assassination strikes. They have a way of closing the circle between detecting a target and sending the order to an aerial vehicle to shoot at that target, basically closing that loop very quickly. That's something that would be required in a hot pursuit situation, like recovering a downed airman who is being pursued in parallel by the Iranians. So I think it's credible. Whether there were actually Israeli boots on the ground, that remains to be seen. Perhaps we'll never know. It could be the Israelis are trying to gain some of the glory from what is an impressive story for Easter weekend. Nonetheless, there's no doubt that those allies are working very closely together, especially when it comes to air power, which is the main branch being used against Iran at this time.
Really fascinating, Dan.
And you're absolutely right.
Out.
Nobody has on-the-ground intelligence about Iran better than the Israelis, and that had to be put to use at some point.
Absolutely, and this being a joint operation really changes the contours of this story, if that is confirmed. Hey, Jeff, I'm looking at the guidance for the president today. He's got executive time this morning, closed to press, and then the family Easter dinner at 7 p.m., which obviously is a private affair. Do we suspect he makes some time to talk about this today in front of cameras and microphones?
Good question. I mean, I think there's no doubt that the president at some point will want to have his face on camera and do a bit of a victory lap. Whether that ends up being today, Easter Sunday, or early in the week is hard to say. He did call yesterday, the press operation called an early lid, which is the terminology for when the press pool is essentially dismissed and told that no other activity with the president is taking place that day. He didn't go golfing. And now we know why. We know what he was doing, monitoring this operation. But today, with that success behind him, it's certainly possible that he'll want to say something, unless he decides to hold off because of Easter and address it more publicly later this week.